My name is Richard Sklenar, and I'm the Executive Director of the Theater Historical Society of America in Elmhurst, Illinois.
And what is the mission of the Theater Historical Society of America?
Our mission is to document and to make available to the public the history of American theater architecture, theater buildings. Well, my interest goes back to when I was a kid in high school, and it actually stems from the theater pipe organs that were installed in the movie palaces in the 1920s. I was on the stage crew in high school, and a friend of mine was the organist, and he said, "Oh, come with me some Saturday." I played the pipe organ in the State Theater in Roseland, which is a neighborhood in Chicago, which is where that was my neighborhood theater. And I said, fine. So I did, and I started helping out repairing the organ, and of course started looking around on the stage and at the light board and pushing switches that I probably shouldn't have been pushing and turning lights on and off that I shouldn't have probably been doing, and was kind of hooked on the theaters at that time. Movie going in the 50s, which is the time that I remember, was something of an odd occasion because the movie palaces were over the wonderful presentations that they had been created for. It was, by and large, it was double feature movies. It wasn't like today. You started at any time. You just walked into the theater at any time. You didn't wait for a show to begin, and you just sat through the movie, the second movie, until the time at which you came in, and you left after seeing the end of the movie and the whole of the next one and the beginning of the first movie.
Mm-hmm. Growing up here in Chicago, in the Chicago area, where there's so many classic movie theaters and different types of classic movie theaters, what was your favorite theater?
Well, I think my favorite was the Avalon Theater on the southeast side of Chicago, which is in fact the model in front of which I am sitting at this point. This is in the museum area of Theater Historical Society. I knew that building again as a kid in high school. The Avalon is a wonderful John Eberson atmospheric theater, and some of my friends from school were ushers at the Avalon Theater, and we used to get in for nothing.
And I don't know, is that theater still?
That building is still there. It was renovated about 15 years ago. It was, the name was changed to the new Regal Theater in homage to the Regal Theater, which was the African-American movie palace on the south side of Chicago, which had been demolished. And the folks that put that together, the new Regal Foundation, it was about a black performing arts center when they were finished with it. And the building is still there, but unfortunately closed for the last couple of years.
Now, growing up in the 50s, do you remember when the widescreen mania came in of CinemaScope, Cinerama? Well,
I remember Cinerama specifically because I was in Cub Scouts, and we did a field trip to the Palace Theater in Chicago to see This Is Cinerama. And I can remember I was in about the third row of the balcony on the right side. And of course, when Cinerama, that movie started, it was just a small screen. They had the drapes closed on the big screen, and it was in black and white. And Lowell Thomas, the wonderful radio voice and the narrator of travelogues, was talking about the movies and what we were going to see, and then he intoned, "This is Cinerama," and of course then the curtains opened to the full 120-degree spectrum of that curved screen, and you had the three projectors going in color, and you were on a roller coaster going up and down the hill, and of course for a kid in Cub Scouts this was phenomenal. I'm an irregular moviegoer. I've never been somebody that has to go and see the latest movie immediately. And if you're asking obliquely what my neighborhood theater is, my movie palace that I go to today, it is the Lake Theater in Oak Park, Illinois. It is a Thomas Lamb design Art Deco from 1937. It is owned by the same folks that owned the York Theater here, Willis and Shirley Johnson. It's called Classic Cinemas. The main auditorium at the Lake Oak Park has been divided, but they've kept most of the original decor. It is streamlined, modern, and if I know that a particular picture that I want to see is going to be shown in that particular auditorium, I certainly will make an extra effort to go to see it there. And I will go there to see movies in other of their newer auditoria also, because I like the ambiance in that building, and I like the fact that it's an old building that's got new life in it.
Do you ever go to the multiplexes?
I do go to multiplexes. I like stadium seating. I like 50-foot wide screens. I like wonderful sound systems. So okay. I'm not I'm not such a purist that I won't go to somebody's local multiplex. Thank you.
How do you feel about the ads before movies?
I usually can distract myself enough that I'm not paying attention to the ads. I'll just dawdle with my box of popcorn, thank you, and try to avoid the ads going on around me until it's time to watch trailers of coming attractions. The Uptown Theater in Chicago is a very unusual case. It is a neighborhood theater of over 4,000 seats, the largest physical space that Rap and Rap, the Movie Palace theater designers, ever did. It's unusual because there isn't a clear idea what to do with that building, even if you were to save it and put $30 million back into putting it back together. Part of the problem is the city of Chicago does not need another 4,000-seat theater. The city of Chicago already is on the line because of creative financing things, including tax increment financing, in the Loop District for 3 restored movie palaces, the Chicago, the Oriental, and the Palace Theater. The city has gotten behind that as a tourism thing, as a revenue generator downtown. They thought that it would be a good idea to have activity on what was the old Rialto District, Randolph Street in Chicago, to have activity from 5 until 9 instead of just in the Loop from 9 until 5. So you have those 3 that are open and operating. You have the Auditorium Theater, which of course is the historic 1889 building, which has been redone. You have the Erie Crown Theater, which is a convention facility on the lakefront at McCormick Place with 4,000 seats. You have the Civic Opera House with about 4,000 seats. You have a new 4,000-seat theater in Rosemont, close to O'Hare Airport. Chicago doesn't really need another 4,000-seat auditorium, which would be the restored Uptown Theater. That building needs to have some creative uses found for it besides being a large venue for live programming. There is a booklet from the National Trust for Historic Preservation called Curtain Up, and it goes through all of the steps on what you need to do to organize in a community in order to save and reuse your historic theater. And it's a good basic primer for anybody that's interested in doing that. And it lays out some of the pitfalls about trying to save a theater building, including learning how to work with your legislators, the powers that be, the city fathers, and then making connections to the business community, and bringing on board very early on the architects who are experienced in doing these type of structures, the financial people who are experienced with the historic preservation tax credits that are available, and all of the sophistications that would be necessary and needed to put a project together. I was very involved in the early 1980s in the Save the Chicago Theater movement. We had a group called Chicago Theater Trust. That was the first people-based, popular-based group in the city to try to save that building, because we had the connections that knew that the building, despite the current owners at that time's protestations, we knew that they had very well advanced plans about knocking that building down and putting up another skyscraper. And we got as far as we could with the resources that we, as the individuals that came together, had. And we made enough noise and few enough enemies that other people came along and actually put that project together. And that's what needs to happen anywhere for anyone that's looking to save and reuse a historic theater building. Certainly there's a dichotomy. If the building is pretty and wonderful and is a design aesthetics matter, that's one thing, and that might be a reason to save a theater building because of the purity of its design. We could talk about the Ziegfeld Theater in New York City, designed by Joseph Irwin, but now gone. As compared to the historical significance of the Gaiety Boston, first black vaudeville, early burlesque in the purest sense of burlesque. There could, either one of those could be a reason for saving a building, as long as it wasn't just going to be a space that was saved and had no use. Well, this might be impolitic to have me in my position go through a list of theaters that I particularly like. I am fond of the Oriental Theater in Chicago. I am fond of the Ohio Theater in Columbus, Ohio, which is a Thomas Lamb design. And I'm very fond of both the Fox theaters in Detroit and in St. Louis. And there are other smaller ones that I like too.
Why is that? I mean, as far as those theaters particularly.
Why is that? I like those particular buildings because I knew them early on from the Theater Organ Association. And I think they all have interesting and engaging stories about the folks that were involved and the ways that those particular buildings were saved, renovated, and reused. I think the theater that I would have liked to have seen, and the major tragedy of all theater demolitions in this country, was the Fox Theater in San Francisco. I never saw it. We've done numerous publications for Theater Historical Society about it. There's a huge, big, wonderful 700-page book on it, more than anybody needs to know about that building. But it was a tragedy that they allowed that building on that street, in that place, to be demolished. That's the one that I would have liked to have seen.